The day had started like any other on the outpost quiet. A little dusty and strangely cold for a place surrounded by desert-like land. Most people were busy packing equipment, checking communication lines, or preparing vehicles for evacuation. No one expected anything unusual to happen. Everyone just wanted to finish their work and leave before nightfall. But he wasn't like everyone else. He never rushed. He moved with care, always listening, always thinking more than speaking. Since childhood, he had been fascinated with strange signals coming from the sky's soft sounds, broken patterns, tiny whispers that others ignored. He spent years trying to understand them, even when people laughed or shrugged. For him, those signals meant something. They made him feel a connection to something bigger, something far beyond the world he knew. He never believed that the signals would one day change his life. That afternoon, when alarms suddenly began to echo through the outpost, people started running in every direction. Some grabbed weapons, others grabbed data files, and many just tried to find somewhere safe. Rumors spread quickly. An alien ship had entered the area. Not just any ship, but one belonging to the queen of a distant species. Stories about her had traveled far. She was powerful, strict, and impossible to negotiate with. Some said she never spoke to humans. Others said she attacked without warning. He didn't know what was true. He only knew one thing: the signals. He studied for years, always spoke of someone with a strong presence, a voice full of command, and a tone that carried both pain and pride. He never imagined that voice might belong to the queen herself. While others ran toward the underground shelter, he stayed behind. Not because he was brave, but because he felt a pull, like something was telling him to stay just a few moments longer. He stepped outside the main research building and looked toward the horizon. The sky flickered with lights, and a large craft descended with a slow, steady hum. Dust swirled around it, and the ground trembled lightly beneath his feet. He didn't feel fear. Surprisingly, he felt calm. His heartbeat was steady, and his mind was strangely clear. Maybe it was because he had spent so much time listening to signals from the unknown. Maybe he felt like he already knew the presence approaching. When the ship landed, the air became heavy, almost electric. A door opened on the side, and several alien guards stepped out first. Their armor shone like polished metal, and their movements were sharp, trained, and disciplined. Behind them, a taller figure slowly walked down the ramp, her posture straight, her presence commanding. Even from a distance, there was something striking about her. She didn't look wild or monstrous the way some stories described her. She looked controlled, almost regal, like someone who carried the weight of an entire world on her shoulders. People inside the outpost watched through windows and cameras, whispering nervously. Some expected a fight. Some expected destruction. But he took one step forward. The queen noticed him immediately. Her eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in confusion. She raised a hand slightly, signaling her guards to halt. They obeyed at once. Dust settled between them, and the world seemed to grow quiet. He felt a familiar sound inside his mind, a soft rhythm, like the same signal he listened to all these years. It was faint, but recognizable. Without thinking twice, he let the phrase he had studied for so long slip out of his mouth. It wasn't perfect, but it was clear enough. It was an old word, one used in greetings, one that carried respect. It came out softly, almost like a whisper. But the queen heard it clearly. For a moment, everything stopped. Her body froze the instant she recognized the word. Her eyes widened, her breath caught, and even her guards glanced at one another in shock. That single word wasn't a normal greeting. It belonged to an ancient dialect, one barely used even in her own empire. Only those close to the royal lineage spoke it, and absolutely no human should know it. The queen took a slow step toward him, her expression shifting from confusion to disbelief. Her gloves trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the shock of hearing her mother tongue from someone who shouldn't know it. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice shaking despite her attempt to stay composed. He didn't answer right away. He didn't know what to say. He wasn't anyone special. He wasn't a soldier or a spy. He wasn't trained for diplomacy. He was just someone who listened, someone who spent years trying to understand voices carried through space, long before anyone believed they mattered. The wind blew lightly between them, carrying dust across the ground. The outpost behind him grew silent. Even the alarm seemed to fade into the background. Every pair of eyes, human and alien, waited for what would happen next. He finally spoke, his voice steady but soft. He told her he wasn't a threat. He explained, in simple words, how he had spent years studying signals because they fascinated him. He said he recognized her voice from those signals, not directly, but the patterns, the cadence, the emotion behind them. He told her he tried to understand, not to invade her world, but to feel connected to something greater. The Queen listened without interrupting. Her steps were slow, careful, as if she feared moving too fast might break whatever moment was happening between them. Her guard stayed tense, but didn't attack. She came close enough that he could see the small details on her armor, the faint glow in her eyes, the tired lines around them that suggested she carried far more responsibility than people imagined. "You spoke in the old tongue," she said, still struggling to understand. "How did you learn it? How could you?" He told her about the transmissions, those fragments, those broken pieces of sound that he had collected. He shared how he spent years trying to rebuild them, to give them meaning. And how, for some reason, the words felt natural to him, like they belonged somewhere deep inside. She shook her head slowly, almost as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. The trembling in her voice wasn't from fear of him. It was from the shock of seeing her own language reflected in the voice of someone completely foreign. That her reaction was something no one in the outpost had ever imagined. She didn't roar, didn't order an attack, didn't demand surrender. Instead, she looked unsettled, curious, and maybe even vulnerable for a moment. Humans had always feared her because of her power. But now, seeing her this close, he realized she wasn't just a queen, she was someone who carried pain, history, and expectations. Someone who didn't expect to be understood by anyone beyond her own people. Maybe that's why hearing her language from him shook her so deeply. A few guards tried to step closer, but she raised her hand again, stopping them instantly. Her eyes never left his. It was as if she was searching for something: truth, answers, maybe connection. He didn't move. He didn't feel the need to. He sensed that whatever was happening was bigger than either of them understood yet. The Queen took one more step toward him. The tension in the air softened just a little. "You are not like the others," she said quietly. "Humans run when they see me. Yet you speak." He wasn't sure how to respond, so he simply told her the truth, that he didn't come forward because he was fearless, but because he felt like he already knew a part of her through the signals. And because something inside him believed she wasn't here to destroy, at least not today. The Queen looked at him with an expression no one expected, a mixture of surprise and something gentler, hidden behind her strong exterior. For the first time, she didn't look like the terrifying queen people described. She looked like someone who had just found a thread connecting her world to another. The moment between them didn't end with a fight or with chaos. It ended with a quiet understanding, one neither of them could fully explain yet. The Queen slowly lowered her weapon. Her voice softened, almost hesitant. "Come with me," she said. "I need to know how you did this." And before he fully realized what was happening, he found himself stepping toward her ship, not because he was forced, but because something inside him told him this was only the beginning of a story far bigger than the outpost, far bigger than fear, a beginning neither of them expected. The silence that followed her request felt heavier than the dust still drifting in the air. He had never imagined standing face to face with the alien queen, let alone hearing her ask him to come with her. Everything around him felt unreal almost, like a dream he wasn't prepared for. Yet, in that moment, he didn't feel afraid. Just uncertain. The guards watched him closely, their hands near their weapons, their eyes sharp and unblinking. They didn't trust him even a little, and honestly, he didn't expect them to. To them, he was a stranger who somehow spoke a language that no human should know. It made sense that they were suspicious. But the queen, she looked at him differently. Her expression wasn't soft, but it wasn't harsh anymore either. It was something in between, something new. As if she was trying to understand him just as much as he was trying to understand her. When she gestured for him to follow her again, her movement was slow, almost thoughtful. He glanced back at the outpost. A few humans still peeked from windows and behind crates, holding their breath, unsure whether he was walking toward his end or toward something important. They didn't dare shout or call him back. They simply watched, trusting him in a way that surprised even him. Maybe because he was the only one who wasn't running or panicking. Maybe because they sensed something had changed in the air. He took a step forward. 2 alien guards moved instantly to block him, their weapons raised. Before he could react, the queen lifted her hand sharply, stopping them. "He comes with me," she said firmly. Her voice carried authority strong enough to make both guards step aside immediately. But there was something else inside her tone, too. A ripple of uncertainty she tried to hide. He followed her slowly toward the ship. Every step felt unreal. The ramp beneath his feet vibrated softly, like the ship itself was alive. He expected the air to smell strange or metallic, but it smelled surprisingly clean, almost like a forest after rain. Once they entered the craft, the doors closed with a quiet thud. The sound echoed through the hallway, making him aware of how alone he now was, surrounded by beings who didn't fully trust him. The queen walked ahead with long, confident strides. The guards formed a half-circle behind him, not touching him, but making it clear he couldn't wander anywhere without permission. He didn't try. He wasn't foolish. The hallway led to a room at the center of the ship round, open and filled with soft light. Strange symbols glowed on the walls, shifting, slowly as if responding to their presence. The queen motioned for him to step inside. He did. She faced him directly now, no longer hidden behind her guards. She removed her helmet, revealing more of her features. Her eyes were sharp, but full of depth. Her skin shimmered faintly under the ship's light. She didn't look like the dangerous ruler people whispered about. She looked tired in a way that came from carrying responsibility for too long. "How long have you known our words?" she asked. Her voice held a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Not anger, just a deep need for answers. He told her honestly. Years. He explained how he recorded transmissions, how he spent nights listening to sounds that made no sense at first, how he tried to find meaning in the smallest patterns. He described how he wrote symbols on old notebooks, trying to match them to tones he heard, and how slowly, over time, pieces started fitting together. The queen listened carefully, her eyes studying every movement he made. She didn't interrupt. Not even once. When he finished, she looked away for a few seconds, as if thinking deeply. Her hands were clasped tightly behind her back, and he noticed something he hadn't seen earlier. Her fingers trembled slightly. "Those transmissions," she said, speaking slowly, They were meant for our own people. They were not for humans. They were never meant to travel this far. He nodded. He understood, but he had never intercepted them on purpose. He simply stumbled across them while listening to deep space frequencies. Yet you learned them, she added quietly. You learned the old tongue. Even among my own people, only a few speak it. She turned toward him again, her expression unreadable. There was no anger there, just confusion and a hint of something else. Maybe respect, maybe fear, maybe both. Why did you learn it? She asked. He opened his mouth and paused. It was a simple question, but the answer wasn't simple at all. He told her he didn't learn it to spy or to impress anyone. He learned it because it felt important, because the sounds made him feel connected to something bigger than himself, because sometimes, late at night, the signals felt like someone calling out not for help, but for understanding. He spoke honestly. His words weren't perfect, but they were real. The Queen didn't speak for several moments. The silence in the room grew heavy again, but not dangerous, just thoughtful. Finally, she took a slow breath and stepped a little closer. You must understand, she said softly. Our history with humans is full of conflict, fear, confusion, anger. You knowing our ancient words, it shakes the foundation of what we believed about your kind. He nodded again. He understood more than she realized. She turned to her guards and spoke in her native language. He couldn't understand most of the words, but he recognized a few. They were words he had heard in ancient transmissions, ones related to protection, safety, and trust. The guards hesitated. One of them gave him a long, hard stare before stepping out of the room. The others followed slowly, still suspicious, but they obeyed. When they left, the door slid shut, leaving him alone with the Queen. It felt strange, but not threatening. She didn't keep her distance anymore. She walked toward the center of the room, her steps slower now, and signaled for him to do the same. There is something I need to understand, she said. Your presence, your voice, your calmness. It is not normal for a human. Most fear me. Most run. Why didn't you? He thought for a moment. He told her the truth again. He didn't stay because he was brave. He stayed because the signals he listened to made her world feel familiar. He stayed because, in that moment, when he saw her, he felt something he couldn't explain, something like recognition. The Queen's eyes softened, even if just a little. Her shoulders lowered gently, as if part of her tension slipped away. You speak like someone searching for meaning, she said quietly. He smiled a little, not sure what to say. She wasn't wrong. She paced slowly around the room, thinking deeply. It was clear she was struggling, not with him, but with something inside herself. Maybe with the idea that a human could understand something sacred to her people. Maybe with the fear that this connection might change everything she believed. After several long moments, she stopped walking and turned toward him again. You will stay here until I am certain, she said. Certain of what your presence means. Certain of what you might become in this situation. Her tone wasn't threatening. It was careful, protective even. She wasn't holding him prisoner. She was holding him in a space where she felt she could understand him better. He agreed without hesitation. Not because he had no choice, but because for the first time in his life, he felt like something he spent years studying finally mattered. As the Queen moved toward the control panel, the soft lights inside the room shifted colors. The ship hummed, gently, almost responding to her emotions. Before leaving the room, she looked back at him one last time. When she spoke, her voice was quieter, more honest than before. You spoke my language, she said. Now I must understand your heart. With that, she left, leaving him alone in the soft glow of the ship's chamber, confused, curious, and strangely hopeful. He had no idea what part 3 of his story would bring, but he knew one thing clearly. This was no longer just an encounter. It was the beginning of something neither of them could fully understand yet. He didn't know how long he stayed alone in that quiet room. Time felt different inside the ship. There were no windows, no sense of day or night, only the soft lights that changed color slowly, like the ship breathed with him. At first, he sat on the floor with his back against the wall, trying to understand everything that had just happened. His mind kept replaying the moment when the Queen heard him speak her language, the shock on her face, the way her voice shook, the disbelief. In her eyes, he couldn't forget any of it. Some part of him wondered if he had made a mistake by coming here. Another part felt strangely calm, like he belonged in that quiet room, like he had been waiting for this moment much longer than he realized. He tried listening carefully, hoping to hear conversations from outside the room, but the ship was too silent. It didn't creak or echo like human buildings. It was built with materials he couldn't recognize, and everything inside it felt smooth, warm, and almost alive. A soft hum slowly rose around him. He stood up, thinking someone was coming. The door slid open, but it wasn't the Queen standing there. It was a short alien officer with calm eyes. The officer didn't speak in words, just made a gesture for him to follow. He hesitated for a moment, but then stepped forward. They walked through narrow hallways that curved gently, like the ship was shaped to guide people instead of trap them. Every corner glowed faintly, as if the walls themselves were lighting the way. He noticed a few aliens staring at him with confusion and caution. He felt their eyes follow him, their bodies tensing when he came closer. It made sense. They didn't know him. They didn't understand why their Queen was interested in him. They feared something they couldn't explain. Finally, they arrived at a door that looked different from all the others, taller, marked with glowing symbols he didn't understand. The officer tapped the panel beside it, and the door opened. Quietly, inside, the Queen stood alone. The room was larger than the last one, with a round table in the center and long lines of moving symbols floating above it. The lights shifted gently, casting soft shadows across her face. She didn't look like she was preparing for war or strategy. She looked like someone deep in thought. When she turned toward him, her expression was unreadable. "You may go," she told the officer. The officer bowed slightly and stepped out. The door slid shut, leaving the two of them alone once again. This time, the air in the room felt different, heavier, but not threatening. She studied him for a long moment before speaking. "You said you learned from transmissions," she said, slowly, "but you did not tell me what the signals contained." He hesitated, unsure if she would believe him, but he told her the truth. He explained how most of the transmissions were not full messages, just fragments, tiny pieces of broken sound. He told her he spent years connecting those pieces together, repeating them, listening to the patterns, the rhythm. Sometimes the sounds were soft, almost like humming. Sometimes they were sharp. But there was always something in them, a feeling. An emotion like the voice behind those signals carried pain, longing, or hope. She listened closely, leaning slightly forward. He told her that among all the fragments he recorded, a few stood out. In those, he heard a woman's voice, calm, but heavy, strong, but slightly shaking. He never understood the words completely, only a few broken phrases, but the emotion behind them felt real. When he finished explaining, the Queen turned away from him and walked slowly to a panel on the wall. She pressed her hand against it, and the symbols above the table changed, forming new patterns of light. "These transmissions," she said, "were not meant for distant space. They were messages between our royal communication lines. Private messages." He swallowed hard. He didn't expect that. She continued, her voice softer now. "The ancient dialect you spoke, it is used only by the royal family. The messages you heard did not belong to our empire. They belonged to me. His breath caught. She turned to face him, and for the first time, he saw something in her eyes that he had never imagined, something painful, something personal. You heard my voice, she said quietly. Not my people's, mine. He didn't know what to say. He didn't know if apologizing was enough, or if it would only make things worse. But she didn't look angry. She looked shaken. I do not understand how those signals reached your world, she admitted. They were never intended to travel so far. They were never meant to leave our communication towers. She took a slow breath, as if gathering strength. The messages you heard, they were sent during a difficult time. A time when our empire faced division. A time when I felt more alone than any ruler should. The room grew silent again. He never imagined that the signals he listened to every night, the ones that comforted him, the ones that filled him with curiosity, were echoes of her private struggles. I did not know, he said softly. She nodded. I believe you. Those words carried more weight than he expected. The queen stepped closer, stopping only a few feet away. Her voice lowered, becoming softer and more human than he ever thought possible. When you spoke my language, I thought it was impossible. I thought you might be a threat. But now... She paused, searching for the right words. Now I see. Something else. He waited, unsure what she would say next. You carry my words, she said. Words I never expected a human to hear. That alone makes you part of something important. He looked at her carefully. She didn't seem afraid anymore, but she wasn't fully relaxed either. It was like she was standing on a bridge between two worlds, hers and his, trying to understand whether to cross it. She motioned toward the glowing table. There is something you should see. He stepped forward, watching as the symbols shifted into a map of stars. One point glowed brighter than the rest. That, she said, pointing to the bright point, is my home. The messages you heard were sent from a tower near that location. He leaned in, studying the holographic display. Then her hand moved, pointing to another glowing point. And that, she added, is where your world sits. The distance between the 2 points was massive, too massive for random signals to travel on their own. Yet my words reached you, she said, not once, but many times. She turned to him with a serious expression. This is not an accident. Something connected us long before today. You were not just listening. Something was calling to you. Her words gave him chills. He didn't believe in fate or destiny. But standing in that room, hearing her speak so honestly, he couldn't deny that something strange tied their worlds together. She stepped even closer. You learned my language because you felt it, she said. Because something in you understood the emotion behind my words. He didn't know how to respond. All he knew was that every part of what she said felt true in ways he couldn't explain. The queen sighed softly, a sound full of thought and confusion. I do not know what you are to me yet, she said. A threat, a bridge, a message from the universe, or something entirely different. She looked at him with eyes that were strong but vulnerable. But I know this. You are not ordinary. And whatever connected our voices, it has changed both of our worlds. He felt the weight of her words settle inside him. Before he could speak, the ship shook slightly. A warning tone echoed through the room. The queen stiffened, her expression turning sharp and alert again. It seems, she said slowly, our time is not over. You may be more important than even I realized. And as the warning sounds grew louder, he realized this wasn't the end of part 3. It was the beginning of something far bigger, something that would decide not only his fate, but the future of 2 worlds. The soft warning sound echoed again, deeper this time, like the ship was calling for attention. The Queen's calm expression shifted into something sharper focused, alert, but not panicked. She moved toward the glowing table, her fingers sliding across symbols that responded to her touch like ripples on water. He stood still, not wanting to get in the way. He wasn't sure if danger was coming, or if this was something normal inside their ship. But when the Queen spoke, her voice carried a seriousness that made his chest tighten. "They are approaching," she said quietly. He frowned. "Who?" She hesitated only a moment before answering, "Our council. They do not trust your kind. They will want answers. And they may not accept the ones I give." He felt something cold twist in his stomach. This wasn't like the tense silence he had felt before. This was different. This was real danger, not just for him, but maybe for her too. The Queen touched another symbol, and an image rose from the table, a group of larger ships moving toward them. The glowing shapes were sharp and intimidating. They looked like an entire fleet. "They came because of you," she said gently, "and because I chose to bring you inside my ship instead of treating you as an enemy." He swallowed hard. He hadn't asked for any of this. He wasn't a soldier or a leader. He was just someone who loved listening to strange signals and trying to understand them. But somehow, that simple curiosity had brought him to a moment that could change everything. The Queen's eyes softened when she looked at him. "Do not blame yourself. I made the choice to trust you, and I do not regret it." He didn't expect those words. He didn't expect the warmth behind them either. Something in her voice steadied his nerves, calming the storm inside his chest. For a moment, the danger outside didn't matter. Only her presence did, but the calm didn't last. The ship trembled slightly as the Council's fleet got closer. Lights flickered for a moment, and the Queen raised her chin with a deep breath, as if preparing herself for something difficult. "He will want to take you," she said. He felt his heart drop. "Take me? For what?" "To question you," she replied. "To test you. Perhaps to prove to themselves that you are harmless. Or," she looked away briefly, "or to make an example. They fear what they cannot explain." He didn't need her to finish the sentence. He understood what she meant. He understood the danger. "And you?" he asked softly. "What do you want to do?" Her answer came without hesitation. "I want to protect you." The simplicity of her words shook him more than the fleet approaching them. "But why?" He whispered. She met his eyes steadily. "Because you understood my voice long before I ever heard yours. Because you listened when no one else knew I was speaking. Because you carry my words in your heart. And because something told me, from the moment you spoke, that you were not meant to be harmed." He didn't know how to respond. All he knew was that her presence felt less like a threat and more like a shield, something standing between him and the danger outside. The ship's door opened suddenly, and the same officer who led him earlier stepped inside. This time, the officer's voice held urgency. "They demand entry," the officer said. The Queen's jaw tightened. "They cannot enter my ship without my permission. They say they will force their way if you do not comply," the officer replied. He felt his pulse quicken. The Queen, however, stayed calm. She walked toward him, standing close enough that he could hear the quiet steadiness of her breath. "You must let me speak for you," she said. "The Council listens to strength, not fear." He nodded. He trusted her. He trusted the honesty in her words, the sincerity in her eyes. And somewhere deep inside him, he knew she wasn't standing up for him because of duty. It was something more than that, something she didn't fully understand yet, and neither did he. She turned to the officer. "Bring him to the center chamber. I will confront the Council there." The officer nodded and motioned for him to follow. Before he stepped away, the Queen looked at him again, this time with a softness she tried to hide but failed. "Whatever happens," she said quietly, Do not be afraid. Knock while I stand with you." Those words settled into his mind like a promise. They walked through the curved hallways again. But this time the ship felt different, not gentle and quiet, but tense, as if preparing itself for a confrontation it couldn't avoid. When they reached the center chamber, the walls shifted, opening into a wide space filled with floating screens and symbols. A moment later, a large image appeared. 3 members of the alien council, seated in tall chairs, their faces stern and emotionless. The Queen stepped forward, placing herself slightly in front of him, as if shielding him from their harsh stares. The council leader spoke first. "You brought a human into your ship without authorization." "I did," the Queen replied calmly. "You are aware of the risk?" "I am." "And yet you refuse to hand him over for questioning." "I do." The room filled with heavy silence. The council members leaned in closer. "Explain yourself." The Queen lifted her chin with quiet confidence. "He speaks our ancient tongue. He speaks my language. He carries fragments of my private transmissions that should not have reached him, yet somehow did. This is not coincidence. This is connection." The council murmured among themselves, clearly shocked. One of them spoke sharply. "He could be dangerous." "He is not," the Queen said firmly. "He is calm. He is honest. And he has listened to us longer than any human ever has. But he knows your private words. This is unacceptable." "It is fate," she replied, her voice steady. "A universe brought my voice to him for a reason. I will not allow harm to come to someone who carries my past inside him." He felt the weight of her words touch something deep within him. But the council wasn't convinced yet. "And what do you suggest we do with him?" the leader asked coldly. The Queen took a slow breath. "Let me decide his place. Allow me to speak to him, study him, learn why our voices crossed galaxies to meet. Give me time, and I will give you answers. But harming him will only create fear where understanding is needed." The council went silent again, their expressions hard to read. Finally, after a long moment, the leader spoke. "You will take responsibility. For him, if he causes conflict, the consequences fall on you." "I accept," the Queen said without hesitation. "And he must stay under your supervision." "He will." The council's image flickered and vanished. The ship finally grew quiet. The Queen turned toward him slowly, her shoulders relaxing. For the first time since the warning sounded, "It is done," she said softly. "You are safe, as long as you remain with me." He let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. "Thank you." She stepped closer than ever before. There was no anger in her eyes now, no suspicion, no coldness. Only warmth, curiosity, and something she didn't have a name for yet. "You asked me earlier," she said, voice gentle, "why I wished to protect you." He nodded. She took a breath, her words trembling slightly despite her strength. "It is because, in a lifetime of being feared, you were the first to speak to me without fear." He didn't move. He didn't need to. Her words filled the space between them so naturally. "You understood a part of me," she added quietly, "before I ever understood you." For a long moment, they simply stood there in the soft blue glow of the chamber, 2 beings from different worlds, connected by a single voice that traveled farther than either of them thought possible. Finally, she said the words she had spoken the day they first met, but this time her voice carried warmth instead of fear, wonder instead of confusion. "Who are you?" she whispered. "To speak like one of us, yet feel like one of mine?" And in that moment, he realized something simple but powerful. Understanding had begun with a single word, but what grew after that was something neither of them had expected, and it was only the beginning.